Well, hello, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well. Thank you for joining us for this online message. Maybe you're out and about on vacation and you're watching this in your camper or on your phone or wherever you're at. So hopefully everything is well with you and that summer is going well. It's kind of the dog days of summer, isn't it? So, all right, I'm going to start off with some quotes from none other than Groucho Marx. He was a comedian, lived a while ago, and he had some funny things to say. Among them are, the secret of life is honesty and fair dealing. If you can fake that, you've got it made. He also said, I never forget a face, but in your case, I'll be glad to make an exception. I must confess, I was born at a very early age. He also said a child of 5 would understand this. Send someone to fetch a child of 5. I've had a perfectly wonderful evening, but this wasn't it. She got her looks from her father. He's a plastic surgeon. And maybe his most famous quote is this. I refuse to join any club that would have me as a member. Well, there's some poignancy to that last one, isn't there? We're talking this weekend about church membership, and a lot of people would say church membership, they'd even question whether it's necessary or not. And certainly, you know, when you go to Costco, you got to show them the card if you want to get in. It's not that way at the pearly gates. When you go to heaven, you're not asked, so what church were you a member of? Obviously, that's kind of a silly thought. So is it necessary for our salvation? Obviously not. But there's a lot of good things that come from membership, and I think it's important at least we look at it and consider. Now, there's a lot of people would say it's unnecessary just because they're leery of institutions, and unfortunately, be very leery of the church as an institution. And certainly we've all either been burned by a church institution, or we've heard stories, or we're well aware of the failings of the institution of the church. Sometimes historically and sometimes unfortunately personally. In fact, I could go so far to say this. I think today in our culture, you can almost consider joining a church to be a radical, almost countercultural kind of thing to do. But that's what we're going to talk about this weekend. I want to read a few passages to you. The first one is from Hebrews chapter 11, verses 24 through 26. And what does Moses and church membership have to do? You think Moses is pretty far removed from the conversation of church membership. We think of church membership as being just a kind of a New Testament idea, and Moses obviously Old Testament. So, but this is how Moses gives us a clue on the value of being a part of a church. The text says this: by faith, Moses, when he grew up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking for the reward. That, if you really sit and ponder that, there's some weight to that. He'd rather be with the people of God than enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. And then this other line, he considered the reproach of Christ greater than the treasures of Egypt, and he was looking forward a reward. I think it's a fair passage to look at in this conversation of why are people reluctant, and so that's what we're going to dig in. But I think that's an interesting passage to kind of start us off. You know, membership is about a few things. I just mentioned 3 words right off. That's about fellowship, it's about partnership, and it's about the word commitment. a commitment to something greater than ourselves. So this weekend, real quick, we're going to spend some time looking at 5 reasons why you should consider church membership. There's a biblical reason. Number 1, Christ and the early believers demonstrated a commitment to the church. Now you think about this in a universal sense. Ephesians 5:25. Christ loved the church. And do you know how it goes next? You know the next line? Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. Think about that. Think about the consequence of what that says. Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. So, what does saying, I don't want to join that, say about something that Christ died for? The church is known as the bride of Christ. Christ died for the church. He died for us to have this ability to be called the bride of Christ, to be brothers and sisters. And what does saying, I'm hesitant, I don't really want to join into that, what does that say about something that Christ died for? Again, that's a pretty poignant thought. So in the universal sense, Christ loved the church, capital C. In the local sense, you probably could guess that this passage was going to come, Acts 2:46 through 47. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes, and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. And this point is, we all benefit from making a commitment to one another. And we tend to be thinking about ourselves mostly, but we all benefit. Just think about that. We all benefit when we make a commitment to one another. And we see that commitment played out in the book of Acts. And also, I can't help but address, the 1 Corinthians 12 passage. We won't read the whole thing, but the body of Christ is referred to as a body. There's a unity. There's an organic relationship that's implied and inferred with the body imagery. Is it unnatural to attach to a body but not commit to the body? And I don't know if I'll have the courage to share this next idea with the folks who are going to be in the building on Saturday and Sunday, but what does a remora fish do? A remora just attaches on to a host and just kind of uses that to provide for them, but never really makes a commitment. Kind of, I don't want to say a leech, that's too strong. But it doesn't seem natural to attach to a body but then not make a commitment to a physical body, obviously. So there are a ton, I think, some pretty powerful, convincing reasons biblically, why we should make a commitment to the body of Christ. Secondly, I think you can even argue that there's a cultural reason. In many ways, church membership is an antidote to our society. Today, the truth is few want to commit to anything. We don't really want to make a commitment to an event. Our job commitment sometimes, marriage, unfortunately. People go into that with we'll see how it works, a commitment to our country. The word maybe has become a very, very popular word. Somebody invites you to do something, and you don't know if you want to go. You're like, yeah, maybe I'll make that. So maybe is certainly a little bit more popular than the word yes. Membership swims against the current. Membership swims against the current of consumer religion. It's an unselfish decision. We all have to fight the temptation to be a consumer. And when you become a member, that is making a really, really others-centered, unselfish kind of decision. There's obviously a lot going on in our country, and it grieves us to see what's been happening with our culture, not just the country, but the culture. What is the core problem of all the things that have been playing out? And I think you can make a pretty strong argument that one of the core problems that we have is just the character of the people. Our character as a people. We oftentimes lack integrity. Our leaders are very hypocritical and issues with media and a lack of honesty. And it goes, at the core, I think, goes back to a lack of character. Commitment builds character. Think about if you've got kids that have grown up. Do they play an instrument? Do they practice a sport? How they do in school? Commitment to anything builds our character. And we need to be a people that are committed because it is an antidote to society. Hebrews 13:17 says this, "Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls as those who will have to give an account." Here's a kind of interesting question kind of popped in my head as I was preparing this. Why do Jewish people wear yarmulkas, also known as a skull cap? I looked it up. 1800 years ago, a Talmudic sage named Rav Nachman began to wear a head covering to remind himself that God is always above him. Just a physical thing to do to remind him that God was above him. Basically, he was recognizing the fact, submission is good for us. Membership defines who's made the commitment to be led and also to know who has been chosen to lead. When we neglect the importance of membership, it becomes difficult to see how we can follow this command or this teaching in any kind of practical way. The truth is that we are oftentimes reluctant to be led or even to recognize the need for authority. And I hate to bring it up because it is an ugly word, but a reluctance to be led or a reluctance to recognize our need for authority. Is there any element of pride in that? Is there any element of I don't want to because I don't want someone to tell me what to do? And it's a pretty brash thing to say, but you see pride played out in our culture in destructive and powerful ways each and every day. And how important it is that we be a people who are willing to submit ourselves to God, submit ourselves to authorities, and it's countercultural. It's an antidote to everything that's wrong in our society, in our culture, and unfortunately, culture and society have bled over into the church more and more and more. You can see some pretty dramatic examples of that, but this might be more of a little bit of a sneaky way that we see culture influencing the church. The third reason is just, to be honest, is just a practical reason. It identifies who we can depend on. Every team has a roster. We know who's on the team. Every school has an enrollment. The school across the street is going to fire up here in a few weeks, and they're going to have a list of students that are supposed to be there. Every business has a payroll. They know who their employees are. Businesses don't want to guess each day who's the employee. Even the Army obviously has an enlistment. They know who's in what service. We need to know who's kind of on our team, You want your church to be organized. One of the best compliments I think I ever heard was somebody said, when they visited us at our launch, I think it was at our launch or soon after our launch, we were back at the middle school, and we had banners up that said Deep Rivers Church and flags and, some things to kind of make it not feel like a middle school. And they said something like, "Oh, we thought you were a church plant from another church." Now, that might not mean anything to you, but that meant the world to me. We are an independent church plant. We didn't have a church plant us. We are a standalone church plant. We're very much in the minority when it comes to that. And somebody walked in, saw the banners and the flags, and they thought, oh, they must be a part of another church plant because they're organized. You want us to be organized. You want your church to be structured. Now, sometimes things get overstructured and overorganized. I get that, and that's certainly something to be aware of. But membership is an essential necessity to anything that's going to be organized. It sort of defines our church family. It brings stability. We want the church to be a rock. We want the church to be a place of stability. And sometimes I find myself envious of other churches who have more people or their own history, their own building, their own legacy, because those things kind of add a stability. Now, all those things also can have a downside, and so I'm grateful that we don't have the trappings of some of those things. But we want stability in our church, and stability comes when we recognize, hey, these are the people that are on our team. These are the people who are on our roster. It also, like I said, it identifies who we can depend on. Do you know that there's 25 different jobs, 25 different roles, 25 different things that we have an opportunity to do to serve here at the church? And eventually members and elders, and there's a local accountability. All those things are important to a local church. And here's the question is, we are going to get our children's ministry up and running again. And who do you want teaching Sunday school? Do you want just anybody down there teaching Sunday school? Do you just want anybody? We're going to have background checks and all the legal things that we have to do. But you want us to be a little bit discerning. And teaching Sunday school might be one of those things that we reserve for members and not just somebody who is an attender. So again, it comes back to you want your church to be organized. And that means eventually, like I said, having members and elders, and we have a local accountability now, but it's going to be great to have some more of those things in place in the coming days. The fourth reason is a spiritual reason. It produces spiritual growth and needed accountability. Now, Hebrews 10:25. You might not know the verse off the top of your head, but over the last 15, 16, 18 months, it's probably been a verse that has been quoted more often than before. It's the part of Scripture that says that we should not give up on meeting together. That's Hebrews 10:25. But let me read 24 and 25 too. It says this, let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. Our fellowship, it edifies everyone, and it makes us more accountable to each other. On a Saturday night or a Sunday morning when people are getting ready to drive over to church, they're getting dressed on a Sunday morning, or they're wrapping up their Saturday afternoon activities, I wonder if people actually entertain this thought, am I going to be missed if I don't show up? And the answer is yes, you are missed when you're not here. Fellowship edifies everyone. We have young families that come, and sometimes when those young families come and visit, we have other young families who aren't here, and I think, I wish they would have been here because then the kids would have connected, and that's just one example, but you're missed when you're not here. Fellowship edifies everyone. Just your presence can be edifying. Your presence is a present. Your presence is a present to each other. You simply cannot be formally accountable when you're not committed to a church. Again, there's this measure of accountability and spiritual growth. I'll tell this story. I'll try to tell it quickly, and it kind of relates, but the college that I went to a small Christian college in Illinois. And after I graduated from there, I heard a story about a couple that was dating. I knew one of them. I knew the guy a little bit. They were dating, and they wanted to do things physically that they knew they weren't allowed to do because they weren't married. So you know what they did? They snuck off and went to the local courthouse and got themselves married. But they didn't tell anybody about it. So they sort of eloped, but they kind of entered into a legal agreement with the state of Illinois that they were married. So then they were able to enjoy the things that married people are able to enjoy. Now, it leads to a big conversation of, now, were they really married in God's sight? Because nobody knew that they entered into this marriage. They had no wedding. And in some respects, a wedding is an accountability ceremony. You're getting your family and your friends together and you're making a promise to one another. And when we gather together, there's an accountability to one another. One of the sad things that has also happened over the last 6 months or so was with the death of Ravi Zacharias, very well-known speaker, Christian leader, I can use that phrase. And then after he passed, there's all kinds of things that kind of came to light about his life that were very sad and sobering and not good. And one of the things people kind of realize is, Ravi was not a part of a church. Now, maybe most weekends he was out preaching at a church or sharing because he was a traveling speaker who did apologetics talks and sermons. But Ravi, it appears, was not at the time, for a good chunk of his life, at least toward the end, not a part of a church where he had some accountability. And I know that's a pretty extreme example, but it just goes to show the importance of being a part of something. So I think those are two powerful things that kind of show the importance of being accountable to others. When you hear the word, I'm going to share a word. I want you to kind of think, what's the first thing that hops into your mind when you hear this word? And the word is discipline. All right, what was your very first thought? Now, you might have had two options. The first option might have been discipline is saying no to something. I'm going to show discipline, and I'm not going to eat that bowl of ice cream before I go to bed. I'm going to show discipline, and I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to show discipline by doing something that hopefully is good and beneficial to you. Or, when you heard the word discipline, you might have thought of the word punishment. There is what I would almost call an unspoken accountability when we gather together. Showing discipline by saying yes to church, saying no to the things of the world, saying yes to accountability can avoid the punitive discipline from God. So this word discipline, again, it has kind of two major thoughts behind it. Saying no or saying yes to something and avoiding punishment. And this idea of church membership, I think, kind of addresses both of those. When we say yes to something, when we show discipline by saying yes with this kind of unspoken accountability. Accountability groups and accountability relationships, obviously I'm not going to downgrade them, but people aren't always honest in their accountability. I've heard more than one story about people who are in an accountability relationship, but they're still off kind of doing their own thing because we lie. But in church, in the body, in our family, I think there is what I would call an unspoken accountability. We kind of hold each other in check without maybe even cognitively recognizing it. The fifth reason, the last reason, it's a personal reason, that you are created for relationship. Again, let's go back to culture. It's so divisive. Why has culture become so divisive? I even used the word tribal. Why has culture so tribal with almost a blind allegiance to our side? One of the reasons is that God wired into you a desire and a need to be with others and to be a part of something bigger. I've said it before, the most hardened criminal do all kinds of horrific things, but they fear solitary confinement more than anything else. Because even though they might have done some very antisocial things, at the core, they are a relational being. And to be separated from everybody else, it's the worst punishment possible, even for a hardened criminal. God is relational by nature. He created you to reflect that. So isolation and even being overly focused on things, entertainment, hobbies, is not God's best plan for your life. So even if you're not a hermit, we tend to focus our attention on all kinds of other things. And that's not always God's best plan. Church membership, the commitment, means leaving behind the comfort of individualism and voluntarily allowing yourself to be committed to others. In fact, it's a beautiful picture of the gospel. Jesus left behind his comfort and committed himself to us. Again, going back to Moses, he left the comfort of living in Pharaoh's home because he saw the need to be committed to his own people. So here's the big question. Let's be honest. Do you want shepherding? Do you want to be cared for? Now, in crisis, yes, everybody wants to be shepherded. Everybody wants to be cared for when something bad is going on. But every day, when things are good, do you want to be shepherded? There was a time in my life when I was kind of sent adrift from the local church I was a part of, and it was an unsettling feeling. And it was the first time I really didn't feel tethered to a church. Growing up in the church, even when I went to college, I helped out at different churches, and I might not have been at church every single Sunday when I was in college, but I still felt like, I participated in local churches. I kind of still felt like my home church was my church, even though I was at school. But in that season of life, I felt untethered. I felt adrift. It was it was an unpleasant experience. Do you want to be shepherded? Do you want to be cared for? Acts 20:28 says this: keep watch over yourselves and all the flock of which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers. Be shepherds of the church of God, which he bought with his own blood. Again, I think you make the pretty strong argument that membership is implied when the New Testament requires elders to care for those they serve. Leaders can care for anyone, but again, the Bible and Scripture gives elders a special responsibility to care for their specific group, their specific community of people. Now, I use this example. I'm not proud of this either, but a lot of people want to hang out with Nicole. A lot of women want to hang out with Nicole. Young women will seek her out. And Nicole has been very good about kind of pouring into and spending time with people. But I remember one time she was spending time pouring into somebody who wasn't even a part of our church. And selfishly, I was like, Nick, you don't have time. We have our own people that we need to take care of. This was a while ago. And I felt like here's this person who is, I hate to use the phrase, using Nicole, but doesn't want to come to our church. Now, some of that was born of my own insecurity, I get. But they wanted the benefits of Nicole without the benefits of being part of our church. And I found that a bit frustrating. Again, I'm not proud of that, and I don't know if I'm going to share this at the live services or not this weekend, but membership implied that the New Testament, membership implied when the New Testament required, membership is implied when the I should have skipped this whole point. Membership is implied when the New Testament requires elders to care for those they serve. Do you want to be cared for? Do you want to be shepherded? Every church is limited in resources, and obviously we are as well. And we need to know who we need to be responsible to care for best. Here's the last thing, just to kind of leave you with. You might not have ever made this connection, but how are membership and baptism connected? Now, we have a baptism service coming up, August 29th, 10 a.m. We're going to be combined outside along the Soterra Creek and Hanover Street Bridge right there. South Hornerstown Road, I think, is the street. So how are baptism and membership connected? Now, it's not what you may think. You may be thinking, some churches say you must be baptized to be a member. that's not this conversation. But they are connected. How do you define baptism? Now, I grew up with this definition of baptism. Baptism is the public proclamation of an inward change. So publicly, you're saying, hey, God has changed me. I'm making a public proclamation of something that has changed inside me. And in some ways, it is very symbolic. But now, I'm older and wiser, I think I would add these two words, spiritual realm. And now my definition of baptism says something like this. It's the proclamation to both the public world and the spiritual realm of an inward change. Think about that. What's the difference between the old and the new? It's a proclamation to the public. Anybody walking by, friends, family, people you invite. It's a public proclamation to the world and to the spiritual realm that there's an inward change. Baptism in some respects, and this might be a new thought, baptism in some respects is the act of putting your flag in the ground and saying, I now belong to God. You're making that crystal clear to the spiritual realm, that I no longer have my allegiance with you, I have my allegiance with God. I am no longer part of your family, I'm part of God's family. And again, we don't always recognize the significance of saying something like that into a realm that we can't see. So that's the idea of baptism. Public proclamation to the seen and unseen world. A lot of consequences, we could talk about that. What is membership? I think the definition is similar. It's connected. To me, membership is both a proclamation to the world and the spiritual realm that you belong to a new family, the family of God. In a spiritual sense, you're saying you're no longer a member of a people that's estranged from God. So even a membership can be a spiritual proclamation that you're no longer a part of that, you're a part of this. We have our 3rd year anniversary coming up. And I know you probably heard me say it before, but I think it's worth repeating. In September, we'll be 3 years old, and about half of our history will be under a time of COVID. And I say that not as an excuse, but as a reason. I think a valid reason. You know, COVID has really kind of thrown all churches off their game a bit. And it's interrupted our plans. But this fall, in September, when we celebrate our 3rd anniversary, we wanted to welcome our first official members into the DRC family. You have an opportunity, if that's something that you feel led to do, to let us know. And there's going to be a membership covenant that you'll be asked to sign. It's just 5 points. And we're not going to make you take a 8-week-long class, and we will have conversation just to make sure you have a clear understanding of the gospel and a clear understanding of what this covenant looks like. But I'm kind of excited. As challenging as the last year been, and to be honest, the last few months have probably been more challenging. Now we're suffering the repercussions of something that happened a while ago. And to be honest, I'll be completely honest, the last 3 or 4 months have been more challenging than the entirety of the first 15 or 18. But we are going to give people at Deep Rivers Church an opportunity, first, to be baptized on August 29th. So if you want to do that, please let me know. If you want to make a public proclamation, again, please let us know. And we've had a few people, I think there's 4 or 5 already, that have raised their hand and said, I want to be baptized. So if that's you, please let us know. But also in September, giving people the opportunity at our 3rd year anniversary to raise their hand and say, you know what, I'd like to become a member. Regular attenders, guests, everybody is invited and warmly embraced, but we are looking for a people, whether it's a few or many, who will say, you know what, I'm ready to call myself a member of this church. So those things are coming up. I ask you to prayerfully consider it and just kind of keep an eye out for what that looks like in the days ahead. Thanks so much. Take care. God bless. Bye.